Hello, everyone. Let's go around the Big Ten here on Monday, December 2nd. Wow. Interesting rivalry weekend in the Big Ten, particularly in the marquee game of the weekend. Ohio State loses to Michigan for the fourth straight year, and there's no Connor Stallions to blame. There's nothing. It's Ohio State has to take a long, long look in the mirror after this game because they have nobody to blame but themselves. A shocking result. I think the last three, while maybe surprising for many in Buckeye Nation or who had become accustomed to winning that game every year, I think you can look at those games like, yeah, Michigan was pretty good those years, not losing to, a nobody or, you're playing a top 10 team, a top 5 team, in last year's case, a national championship team. Not the case on Saturday. This Michigan team has been horrendous on offense. They don't have they don't have a functioning quarterback. They threw for like 60 yards and 2 picks and you still lose at home. This is, for me, the most shocking loss that Ohio State has sustained probably since 1998 Michigan State.
Okay.
I think they've lost to worse teams in between. They've lost to some pretty bad Purdue teams in there, but in terms of what was at stake for them and being at home and everything else, this was the worst loss in a long time for Ohio State, was it not?
Oh, easily. I'm glad that you brought up, not that I'm happy to revisit painful memories, but in terms of where this ranks, in terms of shocking, I'd put it definitely in the same neighborhood as that 1998 Michigan State loss. I would say this is easily in my lifetime, since I am older, I'm not ashamed to admit that I would say that this is definitely in the same category as the 1996 home loss, and the parallels between the 1996 loss to this one, in the sense that the previous week Ohio State had defeated Indiana. The fact that it was at home, that it was against Ohio State, was the overwhelming favorite. All these things, I would say that this one feels to me worse because of the stakes that, at least in 1996, Ohio State back then had clinched the Rose Bowl. So that was something to look forward to. And I'm not trying to downplay or minimize the significance of the college football playoff. Ohio State will be in the college football playoff, but the fact that it felt like Ohio State had truly turned the corner psychologically, that they were doing and saying all the right things, and the possibility of winning the Big Ten championship against Oregon in a rematch was there. And I guess if I had the opportunity to ask the question of Ryan Day, because what you just described in terms of the previous 3 losses, it felt like, in 2021, I'm just going to say that I really thought Ohio State probably, there was a sense of complacency, and Michigan out-toughed them, out-physicaled them up there, and Ohio State didn't want it as badly as Michigan did. And you alluded to the Connor Stallions things, so I'm going to put that to the side, because I mean that what kind of impact that may or may not have had, 2021, 2022, I don't know. But I will say it felt like in this game, it seemed as though the question I would ask of Ryan Day, it just seems so much like in 2022, as well as on this past week, Ryan Day was just, what compels you to want to play a game that plays into Michigan's strengths rather than your own? Because it's a psychological thing. Like, okay, are you that insecure? And I know that sounds harsh, but like, why do you feel that you have to, okay, we're going to run into the strength of the strength of the Michigan defense, that interior defensive line with a reconfigured offensive line versus playing your own game. Who cares if you attack them on the perimeter? Who cares if you beat them throwing the ball through the air? At the end of the game, the scoreboard, if you are ahead, that's what people remember. They don't care about how you did it. And that, to me, like the frustration I'll just say that I'm just puzzled as to why this happened again. Like I said, it happened in 2022. I really thought that the lesson was learned. Obviously it wasn't.
Yeah, I think it's just unfortunate at this point. I think that, unfortunately for Ohio State and Ryan Day, that he has rabbit ears and he listens to all the noise, the toughness stuff. And I think he got it in his head this year, especially as he watched Michigan this year just be bad. So, I mean, it's a bad team, especially on offense. I mean, it's terrible offense. And I think he got it in his head that he was going to shut up every single person who's ever questioned that program's toughness. And he was going to beat Michigan at their own game. And he was going to out-physical them. They were going to win the running battle. He talked about it all week. Got to win the running battle. It's like, I think he needs to start coaching these Michigan games like he coached the Georgia game a few years ago. And I said before that game a few years ago, I said, because they had just lost to Michigan again and the toughness stuff was like
right,
peak, like soft, not tough. I said, he's got to be very careful in this Georgia game. Don't play into that. They call you a 7-on-7 team. Go be a 7-on-7 team. Air it out. Throw it 50 times. It's your best. CJ Stroud's your best player. You got these great receivers. Throw it 50 times. Do not go out there and try to prove a point. And sure enough, that's what he did. He went out there and threw it 50 times, or however many times he threw. He threw it all over the yard. They put up 39 points on like a generational defense. Like, he's got to start applying that to Michigan. And you can tell, like, you see it. You see it the way he coached the Michigan game on Saturday. You could see it last year the way he coached the Notre Dame game, and the way he responded after the game with the Lou Holtz thing, which I thought was funny at the time. But it's like it's a pattern now of like, clearly he listens to this stuff, like these toughness questions, and he's let it impact the way he coaches. And that can't be a thing. Chip Kelly's got to take some blame. Like, what was your brother from another mother thinking out there on Saturday? Where did the Chip Kelly we saw against Oregon and the Chip Kelly we saw against Penn State go? What the hell happened to that Chip Kelly?
I'm just stunned because I genuinely thought that Chip Kelly was going to be the person who, I'm not saying that Ryan Day and Chip Kelly probably, had conversations, just knowing the closeness of their relationship about about this rivalry. But I truly thought Chip Kelly's influence was going to be one of, all right, Ryan, let's just win this game and let's get ready for a rematch with Oregon. I really thought he was going to be a calming influence and allow like Ryan Day to not be emotional. Instead, it was just as bad, if not as worse, than the 2022. I keep going back to that, but it's like almost like he fed the psychological issues that Ryan Day seems to have. Like you said, the rabbit ears, whatever we want to call it, just kind of like, okay, yeah, like I'm in it with you, brother. Like, hey, we're tough. We'll show them together. And it's like, no. You've got you. I mean, I genuinely felt as though, and as God is my witness, it was the kind of thing where when the game, just rehashing it real quickly, when they were down 10-3, and then all of a sudden Ohio State, 2-minute offense, let's pass down the field, boom, boom, boom. Next thing you know, touchdown. going into the half, I honestly thought like, okay, they figured it out. No more screwing around. We know what we're doing. We know how we're going to beat this team. And I thought at halftime that they were going to come out and put up maybe a couple more touchdowns on them and be like, okay, you know, we weren't smart earlier, but we figured it out. And, you know, whatever kind of critique or criticism in the post-game press conference, they would just kind of, oh yeah, you know, we were probably like overthinking this or whatever. No. I mean, like it and the fact that you and I are not the only people that are stunned. I mean, like Joel Klatt on his national show saying that, okay, why does Ryan Day feel compelled to try and play Michigan's game in a phone booth? Like the you know, just to kind of paraphrase that, you know, like how the Michigan coaches were hoping to be within a score, you know, going into the fourth quarter. And the fact that Ryan Day and Chip Kelly fed they did everything possible that the Michigan coaches could have ever wanted. Going into that game, if you had said to me, because I had predicted 42-17, when the news broke that the rumors were true that Will Johnson and Colson Loveland were, I'm like, oh, Ohio State's going to kill these. They're just going to kill these guys. I just don't. I'm at a loss to even describe what kind of a game plan, and the fact that Chip Kelly didn't come out or wasn't made available to face the music by a naturally just inquisitive press corps. I mean, if anything, it's just adding fuel to the fire that Ryan Day, I mean, that this game is too big for him.
So he's definitely got a Michigan problem as far as psychologically. They've got a special teams problem.
Oh.
And they've had a special teams problem since like the last couple of years of the Urban Meyer era. Like this is like almost a 10-year thing now. This is like an 8-year special teams problem where you're making mistakes in fielding or not fielding kicks. You don't have a reliable kicker. They haven't had a reliable play. They've had the number of years they've had a reliable place kicker the last 10 years, maybe like one. Like they've very rarely had a reliable place kicker the last decade. That reared its ugly head. You know, Michigan hits a 54-yarder like it's an extra point, and Ohio State misses 2 chip shots, and neither were particularly close. There's you fire your special teams coordinator, you're going to be more involved in special teams, and this is the product, and it's like, wow. So they've got a chance, obviously, to kind of wash this taste out of their mouths if they can make a playoff run, but there are some things with or without a playoff run, there are some things in this program that Ryan Day is going to have to change. He's going to have to stop with the obsession over we got to run the ball to beat. It is possible. I know this is crazy. It is possible to establish the run by throwing. It is possible to set up the run by throwing to the point that Michigan has no choice but to give you opportunities in the run game. And that's where I thought they were trending there at the end of the first half. I mean, you said it perfectly. I even put on Twitter at halftime, I said, that was really ugly. That play calling was really bad. Like the players were playing hard. There's emotion from the players, but the coaching was awful. The play calling was awful. But I got to think that 2-minute drill woke everybody up and kind of showed them the light. And, the second half, they're going to go out there and be more aggressive. And they were worse. They were more conservative in the second half. It was insane. It was absolutely insane. It was the most puzzling offensive game plan I can ever remember at Ohio State. I can't remember another one. I can remember like weird things. Like there were things Jim Tressel used to do that would drive me nuts. But that was his identity. It wasn't like a one-off, like he all of a sudden decided to like just not do what everyone in the world knew he had to do. I remember back to that Michigan State game from 98 where they get down there. It's like 1st and 10 at the 15 or something like that. And they've got time. Like they've got they didn't have a bunch. They had like maybe a minute and a half. Like there was time. And they threw like 4 balls into the end zone. Like they didn't even try to like, it was just like 4 just prayers into the end zone. It was like, you got time here. You could have run a slant. Like you didn't have to like, Michigan State's got all their defenders back and you're just throwing it into the teeth of them and then in the end zone trying to, hope one of them comes down in your receiver's hands. That's what that felt like on Saturday. It was like, you're doing exactly what they want you to do and you somehow aren't realizing it. And it's clear to everybody. Like it's clear to even the like anyone who follows college football like a little bit knows that Ohio State's strengths are its receivers, its perimeter weapons, and that Michigan's defensive strength is its front 4.
Mm-hmm.
You do not have to be Bill Walsh, Bill Parcells, Vince Lombardi to understand the insanity that we saw on Saturday from the Ohio State offensive staff. It's really weird, and I'm going to be so interested to see what they look like in this first playoff game that they're going to have. They're probably going to host a playoff game. I'm going to be so interested to see what they look like in a few weeks. Like, I just like how they recover from it, but also like schematically, like they're not going to go out there and try that again, are they? Like, was that a Michigan thing? Like, it had to just be a Michigan thing. Like, Michigan's in their head so bad.
I'm going to say something that maybe you disagree with, maybe our viewers disagree with. And I'm not saying this to be antagonistic. A part of me actually hopes that Ohio State is on the road for the college football playoff game, because here's where I'm coming from with this. Is as much as I would love to host an SEC team in a, more than likely cold weather Ohio Stadium, the part of me is kind of like with the fans, as soon as something doesn't go well, just the boos and I don't know how the Ohio State players will respond within that environment, just knowing how devastating it was coming off the field this past Saturday. Whereas if you went into a hostile road environment, that might actually be to their advantage. It might. I'm not saying don't go to the game. I'm saying if it turns out that Ohio State hosts, I'm just saying that a part of me wonders if it might be in the players' best interest. Where they wind up, hosting or going on the road. I mean, we'll see after this coming weekend. But a part of me that's just kind of in the back of my mind, and just to kind of piggyback off something you mentioned with regards to special teams, because again, it's been a problem. I was in the camp of not wanting Caleb Downs to be the every time punt returner, because I was afraid of injury. And then after the punt return against Indiana, as well as the fact that, Seth McLaughlin, he suffered an injury, not even during a game. So I kind of injuries are a part of the game. And I do believe Caleb Downs is the most effective punt returner. I wasn't at Ohio Stadium on Saturday, so I can't speak to it. From watching it on television, and again, I'm just throwing this out there that maybe not that it was a beautiful sunny day, but the sun was out, that maybe that the glare kind of was. I'm trying to think of a reason why Caleb Downs didn't field that punt, because they did give up some valuable yardage that, if he had fair caught it. But maybe that's why he didn't, because he didn't have confidence. But I mean, I agree with you. I think the special teams, it's one of these things that's just been, I'm going to throw out, like Blake Hobbiel maybe is the person that you're thinking was like the last really dependable place kicker. I don't know. I'm at a loss, because to me, like in 1996, it just seemed as though, all right, Ohio State, that they had finally, that they knew, all right, you're going to do it. and they were up 9-0. And then the Ty Streets touchdown after Sean Springs slipped, even though they were still ahead, psychologically they were beat. The weird similarities of, I can only imagine what it felt like to be in that stadium where it's like, okay, like in the second half, like, oh my God, we're going to lose this. We're going to lose this game. It just seemed so much like that.
Yeah, it was shocking. And now Ohio State's got a lot of questions to answer. I to your point about the road versus home, and I do think they're going to be at home, but I mean, I can see that. Like, look, I'm a Philadelphia sports fan, and I've said several times over the years that Philadelphia is simultaneously the best and worst home field advantage in all of professional sports, because if you give them a reason, if you get up early, if you're the Eagles or the Fly, whoever you are, whichever Philadelphia team you want to pick, if you get up early and get the fans involved, it becomes a nightmare for the opponent. But if you can weather the early storm and inflict some doubt, they turn on their team. And sometimes it's acceptable and sometimes it's over the top, but they will turn on them. They will boo their own team. They've been booed. They're 10-2 this year. They've been booed coming off the field going into halftime probably 3 times. There is an element of that with Ohio State fans where they're very passionate. They're very tough on their team. And if you're playing well, they're going to let you know you're playing well. They're going to support you and they're going to back you and they're going to cheer like crazy for you. And they're going to make things very difficult for you the way they did Indiana 2 weeks ago. But if you consistently don't give them something to cheer for and instead continue to like do the same things over and over again and not be successful with them, and you get them front, they will turn on you a little bit. They'll boo, they'll let you know. And that becomes, while an understandable reaction to poor play and to bad play calling and everything else, it does become counterproductive for the home team. So I've made that argument about Philadelphia fans for years. I don't completely disagree. I think they're in a situation right now where so much of the fan base is so angry with Ryan Day and the coaching staff that it does have the potential, if they host a playoff game and they get off to a slow start, it does have the potential to become kind of a toxic situation. I don't really disagree with that. I don't know how you really could, because we saw it against Michigan. We saw things just sort of devolve and deteriorate there as the game wore on, and Ohio State fans started to realize, like, oh, they're going to keep trying this, aren't they? Well, we don't like that. We're going to boo. And that just juices up the other sideline.
Right.
They're booing their team. It juices up. Like, there's NFL, I've seen NFL players talk about it with playing in Philly, where it's like, yeah, ridiculously brutal place to play if things are going well for them. But also you can turn them on their own team, and then that juices you up. And so, like, to your point, yeah, it's a something. I mean, I guess I have to see what the matchup is. Like, if the alternative is like going and playing at Alabama or something, well, no, I think I'll play Boise State at home. But like, yeah, depending on the matchup, I could see that. I could see that being a thing. So Ohio State, lots of questions, not a lot of answers right now. Another program with a lot of questions and not a lot of answers, Wisconsin. 17-point home loss to rival Minnesota to end the season at home. No bowl game. They were 5-2. They finished 5-7. They lose 5 in a row. This is going to be, I thought Luke Fickell would get a nice honeymoon there. But you go 5-7 and you lose 5 in a row down the season. You get thumped by a rival in your own stadium, and you seem to have lost any identity as a football program. This is going to be a miserable offseason for him. And I think it's an untenable situation if he doesn't win like 9 games next year.
Here's the part that I just don't understand. What Luke Fickell was thinking is that obviously they had invested in Tyler Van Dyke as their quarterback, and he went down. went to Braden Locke. They saw that wasn't really the answer. Why they never gave their freshman quarterback any opportunity to play, just to see, all right, maybe that they had something there, and the issues with their attempt at changing their offensive identity. I mean, that's a big part of it. I mean, that was a self-inflicted wound that Luke Fickell decided. I'm again struggling to articulate what the thinking was, because watching that game on Friday, it was Minnesota was always in complete control. Never tried to do anything fancy. Wisconsin just never looked like they were ever a threat. And post game, like the people on like the CBS show were basically saying, all right, why, like I believe it was Rick Neuheisel, just to kind of paraphrase what he's, it was that, all right, Barry Alvarez had a blueprint that worked for them for so many years. Luke decided to go away from it, and by and large, it's kind of, all right, who are the difference makers that Wisconsin has on offense? What do they have on defense that, like that makes you kind of sit up and kind of be, concerned or aware about? So they were, I mean, it was, by and large, I agree with you. I think it's going to be a brutal offseason, because not only, I know that we're only a few days away from the initial signing period, and the transfer portal will be opening, but I mean, there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and it's going to be crucial that he nails the offensive coordinator hiring, because they have to get back to what was an effective offense. It wasn't sexy, but it was effective.
Yeah, I think like it's clear, like that fan base, which is relatively, I mean, they're passionate, but they're not like, I think they're relatively reasonable in their expectations. I don't think it's a group that thinks like Wisconsin should be like competing for a national championship every year. So I think that I think if you lose them, you've probably been pretty bad, and he's lost them. Mm-hmm. Now, can you get him back? We'll see. I don't think they're going to fire him, but I think if he goes 6-6 next year, he gets fired.
And it wouldn't surprise me if Chris McIntosh, the athletic director, was shown the door as well, because he was the one who made the decision. We talked about it previously. Say what you will about, okay, well, we need a fresh start from Paul Chryst. They had Jim Leonard there, a guy who is Wisconsin through and through. And the way that they didn't keep Jim Leonard in the permanent position already, again, I'm just trying to put myself in the mind of a Wisconsin fan, is that, okay, it wasn't working with Paul Chryst, or maybe it had run its course, because Paul Chryst was a continuation of, the Barry Alvarez philosophy. Jim Leonard, Wisconsin guy, played for the program, knew the ins and outs. The fact that they did not, and I know that it was Luke Fickell's decision, but that Chris McIntosh didn't give Jim Leonard the permanent job. That's why I'm thinking that, okay, the fans are souring on him too. So that, like you said, like you go 6-6, which is a definite possibility that might be enough that, all right, that they say, we need to completely start all over. And that includes the athletic director.
Yeah. No, I do think it's reasonable to think that Fickell and McIntosh may be tied together in all this. But that's a program that has just lost all of its juice. And what a huge offseason for them. They got to figure this out. They don't have much time left, I don't think. I think patience is running out.
No, to your point about they're not expecting a national championship. What they're expecting to be is one of the fringe teams in the college football playoff. I mean, like that's I mean, like
20 years.
That's exactly it. I mean, like they're using the barometer of where they were during the Barry Alvarez, and I'm going to say it, Brett Bielema, things that worked. I mean, I know, that Brett Bielema screwed up by, trying to, push it with, wanting more money than Barry Alvarez could afford. And so he went to Arkansas, but that didn't turn out well for him. And he, kind of learned his lesson, and he's doing a good thing at Illinois.
Mhm.
That being said, I think those fans, they remember, okay, going 8-4, 9-3, 10-2, strong running game, consistently solid defense, being, like I said, like by that kind of standard, they would be in the discussion for being in the college football playoff, or at least very close to it. And they're nowhere close to it. Obviously 5-7 this year.
Yeah. Yep. Sticking in that part of the country, Nebraska, Iowa went probably right as about as people would expect. 13-10. Iowa gets a nice home win to close the season. How do you look at this season for Nebraska? Yeah, I don't like. They're 6-6. They're going to go to a bowl game, but they were 5-1 at one point. Like I like Matt Rule. I think he's got them going in the right direction. But isn't this a bit of a weird year? Like I think there's probably a lot of fans of Nebraska who aren't feeling great right now, especially versus maybe what they were feeling 6 weeks ago.
I would agree with that. If anything, Nebraska, they should feel better than they have, over the last few years. I realize 6-6 is not what any Nebraska fan, like you said, where they were several weeks ago in terms of their win-loss record. I freely admit I thought that they were going to do much better than 6-6, but the fact that they got to a bowl game, the fact that Matt Rule has the program pointed in the right direction. What's unfortunate, I will say it, for Nebraska, losing a couple key assistants on that defense. So now that's gonna set Nebraska back. But I think Matt Rule hopefully will find capable replacements. That being said, Nebraska to me is always the cautionary tale. We're talking about Ohio State, the cautionary tale of, all right, don't overreact, don't make the wrong decision, because Nebraska, this is a 20-year tale of making a horrible mistake and paying dearly for it. Nebraska, I mean, back in the day, Nebraska was, a national championship contender, and they're, again, 6-6, nowhere close to it. But what they had, before, compared to what they have now, I mean, by effectively dismantling what worked so well, it's taken them 20 years just to get back to this. So that's kind of where I am with all these people that have their pitchforks and torches ready for Ryan Day. Don't be so quick to do that. I mean, I understand that the frustration and the angst. Nebraska is exhibit A about when you make a hasty coaching decision, that there can be severe consequences for the program for several years.
The notion that just anyone can walk into Ohio State and win 85% of their games is so misguided. And so it's not that, look, if you want them to fire Ryan Day, fine. I mean, that's you want to hold that opinion, that's fine. He hasn't been winning the Big Ten. He hasn't been beating Michigan, and he hasn't won a national title. So I get it. You got to accomplish a couple of those things to coach at Ohio State. But I just think it's always presented in a way that, like, it's so obvious, and just anyone could go in there and win 85% of their game. They act like anyone can do that. I'm like, that is pure Nepo baby, born in the mid 90s, where you didn't even start watching Ohio State until at least the 2002 national championship. And you've got this totally just warped idea of how easy it is to win. And Nebraska is a very large example of that. Now, Ohio State's insulated from some of the problems Nebraska has in terms of Nebraska needing to go hundreds and hundreds of miles to find any talent. But we've seen it. Alabama went through a string of really bad hires. pre-Saban. You can be frustrated with the lack of, high-end results, but you also do have to realize that you are always one bad coaching hire away from a really tough decade and a half. Like we've seen it at Michigan, we've seen it at Alabama, we're seeing it at Auburn right now. We're seeing it start, I think we've seen it start at LSU. Like Florida State just went, what did they go, 1-11, 2-10?
Yeah. I mean, it's just terrible.
It can go bad, really. Like when you're winning 85% of your games, there's very little room to improve on that. And there's all the room in the world to get worse. So it's not just a very simple fix. You better get the right guy. You better get the right guy if you make a move at that level of winning.
Oh, yeah. I mean, again, showing my age, I was in high school when Earl Bruce was fired and John Cooper came in. And I don't want this to turn into a bashing John Cooper thing. I know that's always popular around this time of year when people remember, his struggles against Michigan. I will say that, with Earl Bruce, for all of the criticism, like you said, it's like, like when you're doing well and you start to go down, there's more room to go down. That it was the first few years of John Cooper's tenure. And I'm not talking about Michigan. I'm just saying, just in general, that people were kind of looking around like we were better under Earl Bruce. I mean, the record, it took, and in fairness to John Cooper, I don't think, I realized that was 30 years ago, that I don't think John Cooper would have nearly the runway that he had. And so my point is that I think for these people that are clamoring, I understand the frustration. You can count me among you. Okay. The frustration is there. It's understandable, but just understand that it's not as, like you said, it's not as easy to just pluck somebody and put them in and that things are going to be immediately better. I mean, the possibility of things actually going much worse is very real. So that's why, again, I think when it comes to Nebraska, I realized kind of a weird dissertation on this is that, the Frank Solich hiring was a mistake by Steve Peterson 20 plus years ago that Nebraska just now is starting to come out of. And that's my point, is that I think Nebraska 6-6, yeah, it's not nearly the kind of season that a few weeks ago that I think Nebraska fans thought that they were going to have, but they are going to a bowl. I think that Dana Holgorsen in the offseason as offensive coordinator long-term is going to be much better for them. I think Dylan Raiola had a solid freshman year. They've got a lot of building blocks to kind of grow from and build upon. So I think Nebraska should be excited about what they have to look forward to in 2025 and beyond.
Speaking of a program that hasn't been able to get the coaching hires right, USC. They were competitive against Notre Dame over the weekend. Mm-hmm. Notre Dame never was able to really pull away. They just kind of stayed in touch a little bit, stayed within reach, but just to me, a disaster of a season for USC. Yeah, they'll go play in the Myrtle Beach Bowl or something, wherever they're going to go, but just kind of a disaster season. Like, what are the goals there next year? Like, what result next year, despite the large buyout, which we know is an issue, what result next year would maybe get Lincoln Riley off the hot seat a little bit and maybe get things back trending in the right direction? And is that result possible, likely, whatever?
All right. I guess if I just trying to think as objective as I possibly can be, I would think if they are 8-4, 9-3, and of those, because a lot of the losses, let's put it in perspective. A lot of the losses this year, USC had the lead in the fourth quarter and gave them up. So as long as USC doesn't get blown out in games, in the Big Ten, and maybe that they actually go to South Bend in October and beat Notre Dame, and that they represent themselves well against UCLA, because UCLA is, even though they're coming off a 5-7 year, UCLA is getting better. As long as USC, I think that they are finishing better and competitive and have like that 8-4, 9-3 type, I think Lincoln Riley stays. I think if they have another 6-6, I think they'll be like, okay, what are we doing? Why are we throwing good money after bad? It's like we're not getting the return on investment we thought we were getting with Lincoln Riley. That's just my off the top of my head type thought.
And then they get to pay him like $40-50 million to not coach.
Exactly. But they might be willing to stomach it after a few years of this.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think he kind of hit the sweet spot. I think he's got to win at least 8 games, and preferably one or two of those 8 be against like good teams.
Right.
Like go get Notre Dame or get Oregon or get somebody that's good that'll give you, some type of confidence you can actually be a top 20 program again. But yeah, this was a disaster of a year for them. I think Fickell, this year's coaching carousel, it's going to start spinning. People can't help themselves. And obviously it is down at like the lower levels, the group of 5 or whatever. I think next year's the big year.
That's fair. Yeah, I would say that.
I think Napier has survived at Florida. I think Norvell's coming off an undefeated regular season with the buyout being like $60 million. I don't think Florida State can do that. So I think Norvell gets another year.
Oklahoma,
I think Venables probably, like Lincoln Riley, gets another. So you've got Florida, Florida State, Oklahoma, USC, Wisconsin, and like I don't think it's crazy to say like, boy, Brian Kelly next year. Like, I think LSU's in a situation where they're losing patience. That is 6 high level jobs.
Auburn too.
Auburn's going to be in that situation. Shoot. What if Michigan goes 6-6 next year, 7-5 next year?
Which is entirely possible. I know that there's a lot of
do they just ride this Sharon Moore thing until, it's nice to beat Ohio State, of course, but like 7-5 is not the standard there. Like, so like, do they ride that through the NCAA investigation and then go and like back up the Brinks truck for somebody else? Like there could be 8 or 9 really high level jobs available next year without putting much like thought into it. So I think next year's the coaching carousel year. I think next year's the absolute crazy year with coaching.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
I think some of those 8 or 9 will save their jobs. I don't think like all of them or maybe even half will save their jobs. I think 5 or 6 of those guys are probably toast after next year because they can't all go 10-2 next year. Like the math's not going to be there unless every other good program in the country goes 6. Like is Texas, Ohio State, and Georgia and Alabama, they all going to go 6-6 next year. So all those programs can go 10-2. No. So like some of those guys are going to be out of a job next year. And so that even if like 4 or 5 of those jobs open up, that is a massive power vacuum and domino effect that's created. So I think next year's the big coaching carousel year. So I agree with you. I think Lincoln Riley gets another year. And just lastly here again, because I think the big talk of the weekend was the Ohio State Michigan game, just a huge upset there, and like what we're seeing at Wisconsin and USC right now, proud programs who don't seem to have any identity. Indiana. What did I say last week? Did I say 1 million? Did I say Indiana by 1 million? I think is what I said.
100, I think.
Not quite that much. They won by 66. It was 66-0. It was as bad. It was as bad as I thought it would be. So I don't know what could have possibly validated our thought process more that Purdue has like just given up. They've since fired Walters. He's out. That was a team we pegged it 3 or 4 weeks ago that they've quit.
Mm-hmm.
Not that they weren't good and they weren't talented. We knew that. But on top of all that, they quit. The towel was thrown in because I don't care who you are. If you're a Power 4 team and you lose a conference game 66-0, your team has quit. I don't care if it's Alabama against Mississippi State or Ohio State versus, Northwestern, whoever it is. You can take the worst Power 4 team in the world against the best Power 4 team in the world, and if they lose 66-0, at some point they've quit.
Oh, easily. And I mean, not that you want to see somebody lose their job, but Ryan Walters, I think, I mean, he this couldn't have been a surprise for him that, the end came quickly and, Purdue, I'm kind of curious as to what direction they're going to take. I mean, I've been of the opinion that Ryan Walters, I'm not saying that he's a bad coach, but it was against the grain of the traditional Purdue coach of like offensively innovative, because that's basically what you need to be at Purdue to be competitive within the Big Ten. And that was even before the addition of the 4 West Coast teams. And as far as Indiana goes, happy for them. I think that 66-0 was, I mean, it's rivalry weekend. Let's face it. I think they were trying to impress the powers that be that are on the college football playoff committee. Like that's kind of their exclamation point. Like, we are deserving. We need to be in. You can see the politicking and the campaigning that's going on from the SEC teams about, like our strength of schedule and we should be in. And, Indiana, they're saying that they're doing all their talking on the field. And the fact that they only lost 1 game, and say what you will about, their strength of schedule, they beat everybody with the exception of Ohio State. The fact that their strength of schedule in comparison to other teams,
and they slaughtered almost all of them.
Exactly. So I'm hoping that the College Football Playoff Committee rewards Indiana. I think it would be, in terms of fairness, it would, the fact that Indiana, I think, is deserving of a home playoff game. But if it comes down to, okay, you are either in the college football playoff, as a road team, or you're excluded. I without even asking Kurt Signetti, I am confident they would say, we'll go on the road and we'll show you what we can do. So I think Indiana should be in. Like we said earlier, I'm kind of curious as to whether Ohio State's going to be a home team or not. We shall see. Penn State, I think how they play against Oregon is going to determine whether they're a home team or not. It really depends, so it's going to be interesting to see, but yeah, the Big Ten, if anything, the season always goes by so fast. If there was any way to kind of slow it down, but I'd be lying to you if I didn't say that, watching the Big Ten championship game is obviously I'm going to be watching it, but it definitely is not going to be what I anticipated. If you had asked me this same question last week about, looking forward to the Big Ten championship game, my interest level certainly took a hit as of around like 3:30 on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, it was close to a 1 versus 2 rematch. And we'll talk about this in our second episode of the week. We'll preview championship week and, maybe talk a little signing day and things like that.
Yeah.
So we'll get into that, but it's still, look, people have kind of trashed Penn State all year. I'm interested to see how Penn State plays.
Yes.
The spread's only 3.5 points. And again, we'll talk about this on, Wednesday, Thursday, whenever, probably Thursday we'll run it. But I think there's some intrigue there. But yeah, the Indiana thing was obvious to me. That was don't you even dare think about putting a 3-loss SEC team in this field ahead of us. That's what that was.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I think the Indiana discussion is ridiculous. And here's why. Nobody is talking about Notre Dame not being deserving of a playoff spot. They have the same record as Indiana. Their loss is worse. and their strength of schedule is almost identical.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody is sitting here saying, well, should Notre Dame get in? Everybody thinks Notre Dame should get in. Pretty much everybody thinks Notre Dame should be the 5 or 6 seed. And yet we're having this conversation about Indiana. Why? Well, I mean, it's obvious. It's why. It's because because of the brand. It's the logo. And Notre Dame's Notre Dame. But if you did a blind resume test, no difference between Indiana and Notre Dame. And in fact, you may even side toward Indiana's resume because their loss is on the road to Ohio State and Notre Dame's loss is at home to Northern Illinois. So what are we doing here?
Right.
I don't understand this discussion. And then you watch these SEC teams go out and just lay egg after egg against mediocre teams and try and chalk it up to the strength of the SEC. You're not losing by 21 to Oklahoma because the SEC is so strong. Oklahoma's bad. You don't lose that game by 21 points. You scored 3 points against Oklahoma.
I just had a quick point. In case you weren't aware, Joe Tessitore wants you to know that Georgia is going to make the playoff. How many times I was going to say
Georgia Tech by 100, he would have been making that. Like it's
my gosh. Watching that Friday
SEC
night
Alliance, man, they're thick as thieves.
Watching that Friday night, I tweeted out, I said, I really wish I had started a drinking game for how many times that was uttered by Joe Tessitore. I mean, it was, I know that other people, caught it. I wasn't the only one. Like, okay, I get you want Georgia in the playoff. I get it. Don't have to keep repeating it. And the fact that, I mean, I will say that Georgia Tech, I think, was the victim of some egregious officiating calls that went against them, that favored Georgia, but now, like, again, it's like to your point about all of the politicking and the SEC ESPN alliance. I mean, it's going to be brutal. So that's why, going back to what I said earlier about Ohio State as a home game, it wouldn't surprise me if even though Ohio State should be ahead of Tennessee, if the SEC politicking gets Tennessee the home game instead of Ohio State. Wouldn't surprise me at all.
If that's the discussion, it sounds like they're playing each other. If that's like the real discussion happening, that would indicate to me maybe an 8-9 game.
Oh yeah, that's kind of where like the projections, but we'll see.
In one of those venues.
We'll see.
Which, all opinions aside, I think objectively would be an amazing way.
Oh yeah.
North College can be 100,000 people in one of those rowdy stadiums with two very historic programs. So
absolutely,
that would be interesting. So we'll see. We'll have our rivalry week talk here in a few days. Probably talk a little bit of signing day, and obviously then early next week episode we will get into the bracket and particularly the Big Ten angles within the bracket, but we'll look at the whole bracket and talk about the playoff matchups. But I think we've covered it for the weekend reaction. Again, we will see what the committee decides here in less than a week, and I'm looking forward to it. Did I want 12? Not really. I thought 8 was a sweet spot, but I'm not going to complain about more football, and I don't think anyone else should either.
Absolutely.
And everyone enjoy their next few days. We'll see you here at the end of the week with our look ahead to Conference Championship Week. But appreciate everyone watching and listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.